My name is Dr. Richard Fisk, and my partner with me in this video is Mrs. Peggy Bowman Clore. We both were students of the famous musician, conductor, and teacher Nadia Boulanger, whose life touched so many thousands of students, affectionately referred to as the Boulangerie. The title of this beginning effort, which will hopefully grow with additions from many of you as time passes, should you like the idea. So the title is Stories and Tales from the Boulangerie. It will be somewhat brief for starters, but we want to share the fun that it was to be part of this incredible world in France that existed for most of the 20th century before it is forgotten and disappears in a wisp. And then to invite others who were similarly involved as we were to share your memories in the same spirit of joy, to honor the greatness of the mademoiselle that we knew. Personally, the transformative experience of being under the musical discipline of such a great teacher and human being has lasted over half a century and influenced my teaching and musicianship, and the stories continue. Now I will pass you over to Mrs. Peggy Bowman Clore.
Hello, my name is Peggy Bowman Clore. I was a student of Mademoiselle Nadia Boulanger. I first went there in 1969 in the summer. It was the studies at Fontainebleau, and it was for the month of July and the month of August at that time. I had gone because I had seen an announcement on the bulletin board at Hunter College, where I was studying musicology. And I decided to check up on it. And I checked up on it and I found it to be interesting. So I applied, and actually I was surprised to find that I was accepted. I went to Fontainebleau in 1969 in the summer, and I found Mademoiselle Boulanger to be a very interesting person. She had such an interesting background. And just personally, without the background, she was a very interesting, intelligent, deep-thinking person. And I was so impressed with her that when I finished at the end of the summer 1969, I went back to Paris in November of 1969 and just went on and stayed. And I stayed with her for I stayed with the studies with her for about 3 years. During that time, she had me very often coming in, reading her letters to her. She had problems with her eyesight, and she would have me reading her letters. And it was from that I learned a lot about her. I was around her a lot, and I actually never got tired of being around her. And she had so many interesting friends. Many of them were aristocratic. They had titles like Viscount and Duchess and all such titles as that. And they were all a group of very plain acting persons. They didn't put on a whole lot of fancy airs. She also had a lot of musician friends, and there were artists. I met an artist who was a painter, who was well known. If I were to call his name, I can't think of it at this moment, but you would know him right away because he did Fiddler on the Roof paintings. He was also very humble and very ordinary. There was Raphael Pugliano, the great harpsichordist, and there were all types of pianists, and these people were around her all the time. There were composers. Now, she knew Igor Stravinsky, but I never met him. And she was always in touch with him. She was the godmother of the Princess Stephanie of Monaco and Prince Albert of Monaco, and she was the chapel musician at the Chapel of Monte Carlo. She knew Grace Kelly, and she knew all of the people who were in the higher circles down there, but she never talked about it. They were ordinary people to her. She received letters from them. I'd read them to her. I remember a letter from Shostakovich, and it was written in Cyrillic alphabet. I said, Mademoiselle Boulanger, I can't read this letter to you. And she says, why can't you? I said, I can't. I don't know what these letters are. Oh, but my dear, you must try. You must never renounce without to try. An example of some of the interesting experiences I had with her. But now I'm going to go back to Dr. Richard Fisk because he has some stories to tell also.
Thank you, Peggy. I can't deliver them like you do, but I will try. Fontainebleau was established at the end of the First World War by, I believe, Walter Damrosch, who then was the conductor of the New York Symphony, later to become the New York Philharmonic. And I believe the composer Camille Saint-Saëns was very much involved in the first year, as was Nadia Boulanger of Fontainebleau. And the summer programs are still going on even to this day, but they went and some of the most famous musicians in training and growth seem to have gone through the program. It was, first of all, at the end of the First World War, it was decided that Americans did not have much culture. So the way to get culture was to send them to France for a summer and study at the famous castle of Fontainebleau. And that's where and when it all started, 1921. But studies are still going on there and in the present summers. So I'll put this back to Peggy, and we'll just talk just for maybe another 5 minutes to get this session started about what it was like to be a student in Fontainebleau.
Well, now that I've remembered the name of Marc Chagall, he was Russian also, and he was a good friend of Mademoiselle Boulanger, and I actually met him. But there were others. There was Arthur Rubinstein. I never did meet him, but some of the other students did. Those people were connected to each other because of the Russian background. And she had in her house, it was a very interesting house, you would need to see it, these old grandfather clocks that had been brought from Russia. And they wanted to put them in some sort of an exhibition somewhere, but she would not let those clocks go out of her house. And she had a butler whose name was Giuseppe, and he could do anything. And she always talked about how intelligent he was. And he would keep those clocks in good repair and keep them running. And you would be sitting in your lesson and you would hear the clocks chime. And it was just an interesting place to be in her house. She had pictures. I remember one was Saint-Exupéry, if you know him, the one who wrote Le Petit Prince, and he also was an aviator. And she spoke about him and how many times he had accidents with his little airplane that she said he was practically glued back together. And she had a very great variety of friends. Some were writers, some were musicians, some were, oh, and there was the poet, Paul Valéry. She often spoke of him and of the words that he had over the Trocadero. Que je suis homme ou trésor, que je parle ou me taise. Ça ne contient à toi, ami, n'entre pas son désir. She would also quote that very often, n'entre pas son désir. She was telling you, if you're a musician, if you don't really want to do it, don't do it. She had no respect for people who went out to be famous and to get themselves well known. But she did have respect for those who were immediately dedicated to music. And usually they would have shown that at a very early age. Now, she also had a lot of respect for religion. And she had some very set ideas about what religion really was. I won't go into too much detail on that because that gets very emotional. But I remember she thought that Leonard Bernstein should not have written the mass that he wrote. because he was not Catholic. If you're not Catholic, you shouldn't write a mass. And one of her students, she said, he was Hindu, he should be meditating on a mountaintop and not writing music at all. And we always found those things to be very amusing, and we never challenged her on them. We always just kind of chuckle and share the stories with each other and keep going. I'm moving myself back over now to Dr. Richard Fisk.
Thank you, Peggy. And I think this is enough for starters. There may be one story that you want to tell about when Nadia went to dinner at the house of a famous writer in London, and we will finish up this session with more to come, but I'll let you just finish the session and then we'll stop.
Okay, you want me to finish by telling about Somerset Maugham. She went to a dinner at Somerset Maugham's house. When she rang the doorbell, the butler came to the door and he was nude. And she said, well, maybe he's just a little bit bizarre. But she went on in and she got to the dinner and everybody in there was nude. So of course we said, well, Mademoiselle Boulanger, what did you do? She said, well, I ate my dinner, of course. And that's the end of that story. I want to also mention the fact that a lot of times the people that she admired and the people that she respected for their abilities, they were not women. She said there never should have been universal suffrage. It should have been kings. And never should have changed it from that. And the idea that we don't embrace that idea now that women actually can't do things. Men can, but women can't. And I often wondered about that because she herself was a woman composer. She never got the Grand Prix de Rome. Her sister got the Grand Prix de Rome. Nadia Boulanger got the second prize. But at that time, the women didn't even come out the house. Let's talk about going to the conservatory and write music. So you have to admire the fact that she did pave the way for this big feminist rage that they have nowadays. She was one of the ones who actually started that, going in that direction. So with that, I will close out with what I have to say.
Thank you very much, and hope we'll have some other sessions, and we hope some of you will join in.